do you make of the irony of the location of this COP24 conference? And is it a way of exerting more pressure on Poland to perhaps move away from coal?
Well, I think clearly Poland needs to move away from use of coal, and all the analysis shows that economically they would be better off if they used electricity much more efficiently and diversified into renewable energy. That's happening in my country, in the United States. We're rapidly reducing the use of coal despite Donald Trump's presidency, because natural gas, renewable energy, energy efficiency are basically much cheaper than coal. But the world scientists say that we have to get off coal entirely by mid-century if we're going to have a chance of averting the worst impacts of climate change. We also have to dramatically reduce use of oil and natural gas and make a transition to a clean energy economy.
Well, let's talk about some of those goals. Experts saying now that with current commitments in place, the world's on track for about 3 degrees of degrees centigrade of global warming, which means that obviously massive changes are needed in order to try to hit the 1.5 degree target. But if we're looking at a world where leaders like Trump in the US, like Bolsonaro in Brazil, are stepping away from climate change agreements, how realistic are any of those goals?
Well, they're realistic. We have the technologies, we have the strategies, we know how to get there. What we need is political will. The good news is, despite leaders like Bolsonaro and President Trump, you see increasing numbers of business CEOs, governors, provincial prime ministers, mayors taking action. In my country, for example, in the United States, thousands of mayors and governors and business leaders have committed to try to implement the U.S. pledges under the Paris Agreement, despite Donald Trump. And if you look at where decisions are made about energy and transportation policy, in many countries like the US and much of Europe, they're made at the local and state level. So that gives me some hope, but I think the reality is we need to bend the curve of emissions down sharply over the next 10 to 12 years if we're going to have a chance of avoiding much worse impacts than we've been seeing. And of course, the impacts we've been seeing have been pretty horrific the last few years.
And just in a word, Mr. Mayor, do you think this COP24 can finalise that rulebook on how to put into place the Paris Climate Change Agreement?
Yes, I think by the end of next week, we'll probably get an overall agreement on the Paris rulebook. I think what's more up for grabs over the next couple of years is, will countries commit to raise the ambition of their emission reduction pledges under the Paris Agreement, as the recent world scientists report they have to do if we're going to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. The really key moment on that front is not going to be here in Katowice. It's going to be next September in New York City, when the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, hosts a summit for world leaders to talk about the need to raise ambition. He will be giving a speech here in Katowice tomorrow morning, talking about the details of that summit. That's the real political deadline for leaders come to New York prepared to raise ambition.